Welcome to the Dreamer Podcast, episode 2. And this week we have Greg Bennett from Thenford Farm. Greg is a well-known breaker, probably in my eyes the best breaker in Australia, but I'm maybe a little bit biased. Greg, welcome, Greg. How are you?
I'm terrific, David. I feel better after those words. Thank you very much.
No problems. Um, yeah, I met Greg a few years ago now, back when you were in Queensland. But we'll start off, Greg, with a bit of your journey as to how you've got to Thenford Farm, where you are now, and in the early days of your sort of experience with horses. Just tell us, go back to what you were doing with quarter horses and stock horses in the early days.
Yeah, well, in the early days when I was a kid growing up, we had sheep and cattle on our property, and I did the good old Australian thing and went through Pony Club and did all the junior eventing and riding and competing, jumping and all that sort of stuff as a little kid. And then, the Pony Club thing's a great Australian invention, and it's a great way for kids to learn. And then I developed a love for Western horses and stock horses, so I was breaking in and riding a lot of quarter horses and Australian stock horses, and then when I left school, I was luckily enough offered a job at Hardwick Stud in Yass with Tony Freedman, and that introduced me to the thoroughbred.
And what's the difference with a quarter horse stock horse as opposed to a thoroughbred, Greg?
Oh, look, they're a lot more cool-headed. The stock horse, they're hotheads, but they're a more placid breed. They're bred specifically to do another job, which is be a pleasure horse and a competition horse with livestock and junior events and camp drafting, and they're good on their feet. They're generally around about anywhere from 14.3 to 15.2 hands. They're just not as highly strung and geared the same way thoroughbreds are, but that's because thoroughbreds are bred to run, and that's the way they operate, and it's becoming more and more fine-tuned as each decade goes by.
So, but it gave you a good basis on the thoroughbred by doing that early work with the stock horses, and
Oh, look, without a doubt, because at the end of the day, David, these thoroughbreds that we're dealing with now, they're still a horse. They're still a young horse. They have to be treated like a horse, and every horse is basically the same. When I'm dealing with young thoroughbreds, they don't know that they've got to be a racehorse. They've just got to be taught the same basic skill set that you teach any horse when you're breaking it in, and that's we go through the same process, and it's as we develop their fitness and the pressure we put on them, i.e., jockey pads, work riders, starting gates, jumping and running. That's their forte, running. And if they run fast, well, everybody's happy.
yeah. So it was in 1976 that you got offered a job with Tony Freedman, who is the Freedman brothers' father. So Lee, Michael, Anthony, and Richard. And
Correct?
I believe you grew up in Yass, where the Freedmans. You were on the same school bus, wasn't it, with the Freedmans?
Yeah, well, they all moved down from Sydney. Tony left Sydney with his wife Dell and the boys, and they all moved down. He bought Hardwick Stud, and Lee was had just finished school. Well, not maybe he was still at Scott's when Tony bought the farm. But anyway, he I can't remember, but he'd left school, and the other boys were all at Canberra Grammar, and I was at Lynham High School in Canberra, and so myself and the younger boys all caught the same school bus. Lee was a year ahead of me at school, and or 2 years ahead of me at somewhere like that. Bit older than me, he's an old bugger. I call him that all the time.
Yeah.
But I was on the school bus with the younger boys, and we all just used to do what kids do on a school bus, shayak around and be silly, and Tony got to know me a bit, and I was lucky enough to get a job offered, so it was great.
Was any of the brothers working with their father at that stage?
No, no, only Lee. Well, Lee, yes, Lee was. So
Lee was, yeah.
I think actually, my memory serves me right, Lee had just returned from a stint in Kentucky. He'd been
Okay.
over there working on some of the farms. I don't think in the early days he had the aspirations of being a trainer. He may correct me on that, but I think Tony was pushing him towards running the farm and standing the stallions. Latin Night was the first stallion they had there,
Yeah.
and then they went away and purchased Loosen Up, who was the father of Better Loosen Up, and but then Lee's allegiances changed, and he decided he wanted to be a horse trainer, and the rest is history.
So what were you doing at Tony with Tony Friedman in those 2 years?
So, working with the mares and foals, weaning, handling foals, preparing yearlings for sale, um, helping with the stallions, covering mares,
Yeah.
and also using stock horses on the place to look after the cattle. We had quite a big herd of cattle, so I was probably a rouseabout jackaroo
Yeah.
on a little family-owned thoroughbred stud, bit of everything.
Yeah. And after that, you went to the US to do some work in the US.
Yeah, um, I I wanted to be a horse trainer. I wanted to learn more about training and educating horses, and I felt that at Hardwick I wasn't getting that opportunity because I'd learned a lot,
Yeah.
but I was spending more time with the breeding stock and yearlings, prepping yearlings for sale, and then off they go, and you don't see them again. So I decided to go to the United States, particularly Texas, and learn more from the good old cutting horse trainers and over there. And then I spent time in Colorado and California with reining horse trainers. And so that was for about 15 months. And then I returned from there and moved to the Hunter Valley,
Yep.
um, where I went back into the stock horse world, managing a Australian stock horse stud at Marundai. Um, and then again, I started to be approached by different thoroughbred people to break horses in for them. Um, and back in the day, so I started breaking a couple of horses in. The first two people to come to me about that was John Kelso, who had Warunga stud, and Bill Mitchell was one of the first young trainers to approach me to break horses in. So I was breaking horses in for those two, and it sort of built from there. Um, and I moved away from the pleasure horse industry into the thoroughbred industry because I was told by them that I could charge more to break a yearling in than I could
Yeah.
charge to. And so I was young, I just got married, blah, blah, blah. So we had to try and earn as much money as we could and
Yeah.
still do what we enjoy.
I was going to say that thoroughbred industry there would have been more money around for to create a career.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, as the more I got involved with it, the more I realised that they were very much right in their estimate, in their advice. So
Yeah.
I'm forever ever beholding to them. And I've stuck down that road. That was in the late '80s. I was married in '87 to Wendy, and then in 1990, I through a little bit of pressure from the industry took out a trainer's license.
Yep. And so you trained out of Scone, was it?
Scone, the old White Park track.
Yep.
But I didn't stable there. I was out at Pine Lodge. That's where I started. And so I used their little track out there and used to truck horses into the old White Park track to gallop. And I think I was there for 2 years. We were using that until they shut it down anyway. And then the plan was put in place to build the new racetrack out at Seder.
And how many horses were you training sort of roughly around that stage?
They were all owned by Pine Lodge. I was just doing it privately for them.
Yeah.
I think I had 13 in work, or 10. And I had one truck work rider who was a young guy that had sort of needed a bit of help and guidance, but he was a terrific young bloke, and but he was a big help to me because he'd been around a few racetracks, and so he helped guide me. And I think I had 10 or 11, 12 in work, and I trained 13 winners in the first 12 months of training, which was nice, just a nice, easy adjunct into the game. But two guys that I will mention that were huge help to me because I'd never trained a racehorse in my life. It was just common sense. I was told it was just common sense, and I learned as I went along. But two guys that really helped me were two jockeys that I used, Alan Scores, who's unfortunately passed away,
Yeah.
but he was a great help to me. And another jockey similar age called Harry Troy, who's I think moved to Macau, but he was a great bush jockey, provincial jockey, and they were just amazingly good helps, to me in my early days.
Yep. So you trained. Did you still do the breaking of horses while you were in
Yeah,
the training? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And Billy Mitchell was training in those days.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep, yep,
Which where he retired from training as well.
yep,
So you trained up until 2017 when you gave away your trainer's license.
yep,
But during that time, you had a really good horse called Clearly Innocent, who you trained it up until you gave away your license, and then it went to Chris Lee's. But while you were training it, it had 7 wins from 12 starts.
yep,
You won the country championships at Randwick
yep,
during the championships that the 2 week period, and you also won the listed Luskin Star at Scone during that time. You actually beat. I don't know if you really remember. You beat Music Magnate in that race, and he went on to win a Group One himself, Music Magnate. So Clearly Innocent went on to win a Group One after you gave away your trainer's license, and he ran third in a Stradbroke. You
yep.
sort of missed that opportunity that you had a really good horse that was, up at that Group One level, because you never trained a Group One winner in your time, did you?
No, I did not. No, I did not.
So
Unfortunately.
do you regret giving it up when you had the opportunity with a really good horse like that?
Um, Look, I'd be probably silly to say I was, but at the end of the day, I'm happy because I pegged him to the owners, Crestfield Stud, that he was a very good horse in the making, and I'd had after he beat Music Magnate. Might I mention, Bjorn never forgave me for it.
Yeah,
He thought he was a shoe in that day, and he'd never heard of Clearly Innocent, and
yeah,
we knocked him off. And it was after that I said, "Look, I really believe I can win a Group One with this horse." And then it's funny how sliding doors happen, and an opportunity arose, and I'd been training for a long while, and I was getting worn out and tired, and traveling millions of miles, and I had a very good opportunity put to me, which after discussion I decided to go, and it was a difficult one to make. But anyway, I went, and that's when I stopped training. But I made a point of positioning my horses, all the ones I had with trainers that I thought would suit them, and I spoke at length to all my owners about it. And I'd had a lot to do with Max Lees over the years,
yeah,
broke a lot of horses in for Max, and had a good association with Chris. And knowing Clearly Innocent, because he had a litany of issues, and that's why I got him. I mean, I never went to sales and bought horses, didn't have the money. I
yeah.
was given broken down, second hand horses that were this or that, horses that had issues, and so we nurtured him along, and we achieved a great deal with him, which was amazing. But I'm as proud as punch that he went on literally within 8 weeks of me handing over my license to winning the Group One in Brisbane with Chris. And I've got a photo on the wall here of me and Chris standing arm in arm after he won that race and in Brisbane with Huey Bowman on board. And I'm just as pleased with that as I've got the trophy.
Okay,
Chris
good.
kept the check.
Yeah. And so you did train for 27 years, and back in those days, what was it like training? Was it hard to make a good living out of it in those days?
Yes, it was, and I think that's why in the end I took this opportunity to go to Queensland and run a big farm up there, which didn't involve me being a trainer. It was
Yeah,
just going back to my grassroots a bit. And David, to be honest, I was worn out and tired, and I sacrificed a lot of my family life in the early days, kids growing up and sport and all those sort of things, and a good marriage. We're still happily married 36 years later,
that's good.
and which we love each other and we're very happy. But there were times when work just totally consumed me. I was racing 6, 7 days a week, driving from one end of the state to the other, trying to be the dutiful trainer and be there for every owner at every race meeting. And the way racing grew in that time, it was nothing to be in Moree one day and Tamworth the next, and Sydney on a Saturday, because I ended up with a good team of horses that my country training days sort of slipped away a bit, and I got a level of horse ride. I was in Sydney more often than not, and at the provincials, because that's the standard you needed. But I was just driving a million miles a year, and I took the decision to back away, and I was proud of what I achieved, and still to this day I am. But I'm very, very happy doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, good. So after you gave up training, as you said, you went up north to Queensland, and did you? I know you're back in Sydney in New South Wales now, but while you were in Queensland, did you enjoy the lifestyle up there? And it was a bit of a change.
Yeah, loved it. It was a big change. We were 45 minutes from the Gold Coast, an hour from Brisbane, and I was lucky enough to be able to get hold of a little farm up there that Mick Dipman built years and years ago, and it was I took over the lease on it and started Fenwick Farm, and that's where I met you. And
Yes.
we were pre-training and breaking in there, had a great track, good setup, and I was there for about 4 years, and had built a good crew around me, good staff, and luckily was able to delve into my little black book and get back a lot of my old clients from days gone by, and reassociated myself with them, and started getting some really nice yearlings sent out to us to break in. Not just Queenslanders, though. We were getting a lot of horses from the Magic Millions that were then moving to Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide, and some overseas, lot going to Hong Kong, which was great, and we had a lot of success there. And I think the success was what tweaked a bit of interest in me again in down south, and I was asked to move back down here and do a few things down here, which is what we're doing now.
Yeah, well, I met you in early 2020 through Julian Blaxland at Newington Farm,
Yep,
and that's when you were at Fenwick Farm, and Newington. Obviously, you had a good relationship with Julian as well with the Newington Farm setup,
yep,
and in that season of 2020, you broke in. Two horses, and you broke in a couple of mine as well, which we had some success with.
yep,
Self Indulgent was one of them, but of note, you broke in Artorius, who won the Blue Diamond Stakes the year after, and in the same year, you broke in Stay Inside, who won the Golden Slipper in the same season. Now they were both trained by Friedman brothers, so that relationship of on the bus going to school with them. They obviously he obviously made a good impression on them in the early years because they've gave you horses to break in, and I know the relationship is still there now with Thenford Farm. So when you were breaking in those horses, those Artorius and Stay Inside, was there anything in those early days that those two particular horses who are now stallions in their own right that stood out to you?
I think I might just mention before I go on to that, we also in that same group
Yep.
trained the first and second Quinella in the Magic Millions,
Oh, right.
Shakiro and the
Okay.
horse of Toby Edmonds, a
Yeah.
Queenslander, better than ready horse that ran second. So we had four colts come out of that one group that cleaned up the 2-year-old trifecta basically,
Yeah.
and that was obviously Shakira was for Chris Waller, so that was
Yes.
great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, look, the first thing that stands out is when you're doing a lot and you've done enough over the years, the ordinary horses, you see them every day. The standouts don't come around very often, and they can still catch you off guard. They can maybe not show you a lot in the first week or 2 weeks or whatever, and but then the cream rises to the top. And the main thing is attitude and temperaments, the first thing, and coping with the new pressure they're being put under. And so if they're stable in the mind and they're thinkers and they understand and they trust you, and that's a very pointed pointed part of it is you've got to get the horse trusting you. And I instill that in my staff now as well, that you've got to gain the trust of these animals, because if you don't, they're not going to do what you ask. They're going to fight you. They're going to. So if you've got good attitude and a good outlook on life, talking of the horse here, that's a big help. Then you can build on that and you can work on their skill set, which is their length of stride, putting a good mouth on them, learning their lung capacity, and then at each point in time, growing from preschool, kindergarten into early primary school. That's sort of what we're doing. And then once they get to the high school stage, they're obviously fully fledged at a racetrack. But they're the things I look for is attitude. And then you can build on, when you ride them and they feel comfortable and they float across the ground and they've got a nice soft action. They're not clumping, hitting the ground hard like a draft horse. They're the things that probably that feel you get in a horse is something that is hard to teach. You only learn that from years and years and years and years of riding and being on their back. And I think most jockeys will tell you that. The good jockeys get an instant feel for a good horse. They know the minute they're on it that they've got a Rolls Royce under them, not a Volkswagen.
Yeah, so those particular horses, the good ones, their attitude stands out above other just rank and file horses.
Yeah, a lot of horses are their own worst enemy and it's not always their fault. It's sometimes, there's always human intervention because we've got such high pressure industry from the minute they're born. There's pressure on, and you've got to. But the good ones do present themselves, and if you're a good horseman, and are able to pick up on that presentation from the horse and go with it, that's the thing that makes the difference between not winning a race or only winning an ordinary race or having the foresight to plan ahead and program something so that horse can win a good race eventually. Yeah. And that's obviously Group 3, Group 2, Group 1.
Yeah, so the breaking in process lasts for about 4 weeks, and I know in particular at Thenford Farm you've got other staff there.
Yeah.
Are you in particular getting on the back of any of these horses in their early days to get a feel for them yourself, or are you now sort of just watching on and allowing your staff to do that?
Well, now that I'm 66 and getting a bit slower and a bit not as strong, I'm on the lead pony a lot. I do a lot of the groundwork. I'm not riding the young ones as much. Hardly at all anymore because I've got young people doing it. And that's what I want because I want to develop people as well and I want to develop skills there as well. So I'm watching, but you can see just as much from the sideline as you can sitting on their back. And yeah. I get good feedback from my staff as well because I can see the movement. I can see the way they move. I can see their attitude. And between my riders and myself, we can come up with an opinion pretty quickly. But the month is just the beginning. A lot of times, and we've got to have them going well enough that if the trainer does want to take them straight into the big city to give them a couple of weeks' work,
yeah,
that those horses are going to do everything right. So it's important and imperative that every little minor detail is done properly. A lot of them, most of them, actually, not many do that. A lot of them go out for a month, come back in for a month, and we might see them 2 or 3 times before they actually go to the trainer.
Yeah.
And that's so lots of little bits is better for them than in for a long time, out for a long time when they're that age.
Yeah. Something that I've always been sort of interested in is the barrier work you do with them in the breaking stage.
Yeah.
We've had horses go through our system with Dream that have had barrier issues after the breaking in process.
Yeah.
Is there anything that is done during the breaking in that can prevent that, or is it just something that develops with individual horses? Can you notice it while you've got them that they may potentially have that problem in the future?
It's the more highly strung ones, the ones that aren't thinkers, that just the ones that overreact. I always liken my young horses to children at school. There's always a couple of kids that aren't focused at school and don't want to do what the teacher says and are annoying, and they're always half in trouble and not doing the right thing. And in the playground, they muck around, they get into trouble. Whereas there are other kids that are more settled and can avoid trouble and avoid pressure situations and go on. It's the same with horses. So yeah, when we break them in, once we're on their back, and they've been flagged and bagged and ridden and quiet and worked with the lead pony, we start the barrier education with the lead pony. We walk through with the lead pony. The yearling follows us in, and then we stop at the front of the gates with the lead pony. And that while the yearling's in the gates, we don't shut the back. If they want to back away, that's fine. We walk them in again. It's all about slow, steady confidence building. If they're confident to go in and be sensible, and that gets back to that trust thing, David. You know, if you can get them to trust you, they'll say, "Okay, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it." And so it's not just oh, gee, that horse is going to Sydney next week. We better get it jumping out. We don't leave it to the last minute.
Yeah.
It's done methodically and on a regular basis. We walk in and out, and then we get them to where they can lock up. And when we do have them locked up, we've generally got a lead pony in next to them, just as a comfort zone. And then when we open the gates, it's on the count of 3. We open them up, and it's a step out and walk, trot away, not a jump.
Yeah.
You know, and then that slow exit is slowly improved upon over a 2-week period. But even then, it's not my job to get it jumping and running 11s.
Yeah.
You know, that's the trainer's job down the track. We get it to go in, stand, be sensible, pop out and canter off. That's all. That's my job.
Yeah.
From then on, it's up to the trainer to then quietly and methodically build on that early education.
And there are certain trainers around, or breakers, that are considered specialised barrier re-educators and things like that. Do you do any of that, or basically you haven't really got involved in that sort of re-education process?
Years and years ago, I did a lot of it because I was asked to, and I was happy to do it, but obviously you can never guarantee anything. And then unfortunately, I always used to try and video it. See, back in the early days too, David, there was no such thing as a phone with a camera in it. So you couldn't video things, you know, people had to take you on your word. And also back in the early days, not everyone had a set of barriers.
Yeah.
The only time the horses the only places that had barriers were the big racetracks.
Yeah.
You know? So your general run-of-the-mill little bush breaker didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
And when I started, there was no such thing as walking machines and water walkers and treadmills and, you know, so none of that happened. So it's the barrier side of it is very important now because a lot of the training setups now, well, they're better now. They're better for that early education to be progressed.
Yeah.
But there's no point in getting a horse 3 parts fit, having it in work and this and that, and then suddenly, or having it galloping and it's saying, "Oh, gee, this thing goes all right. Crikey, there's a barrier trial next week. We better get it," you know. And so the issue then is that horses are put in the gates. They're no sooner in the gates than they're getting popped on the bum to jump quickly and run.
Yeah.
And so that whole process is very daunting for a young horse and can upset them to the degree that they don't want to go in because they know when they get in there, it's all hustle bustle and it's a bit of a nightmare to them, and they're getting whacked on the bum by either a jockey or someone standing behind them because everyone's got it in their head that the horse has got to leave at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That comes slowly.
Yeah, understand. All right, from Fenwick Farm, you moved back to New South Wales, and you've been at Thenford Farm now, which is owned by 2 gentlemen, John Sharp and Tim Miller.
Yep.
And you're now basically running the breaking side of Thenford Farm?
Yeah, we're breaking in pre-training. I've been here little over a year.
Yeah.
I had my first big batch through earlier this year. and we did about 140. And then, as I said, a lot of those are rehashed, they're recycled through. But on top of that, before I got here, Tim Miller was breaking quite a few in, albeit on a smaller scale, and then building a very good pre-training sort of system. So he's doing a lot of pre-training and spelling.
Yeah.
But with me coming on board, we've been able to share the load a bit and increase our capacity to get things done for people.
Yeah. And where is Thenford Farm exactly for people who might not know?
Okay, so we're just south of Mossvale in the Southern Highlands, so about an hour and a half south of Sydney, a
Yeah.
little village called Exeter. We're right on the Hume Highway or the freeway heading to Canberra. It's about a 2-minute drive off the freeway, and it's close to Sydney, so it's easy for owners or trainers to come down here and see us. And we get a lot of horses coming down just for the weekend or a week for a freshen up, and then going back again, because we've got a water walker and treadmill and lovely paddocks, and so we can do a bit of rehabbing stuff as well, freshening up, that sort of thing. We do a bit of re-education, but I will point out at this point in time, I'm not in the game of re-educating old barrier rogues. I'm just not interested anymore, because
Yeah.
you're on a hiding to nothing, really. I will take back a yearling I've done if the trainer's having a few little issues with it.
Yeah.
Take it back at a million miles an hour. I'd rather do that
Yeah.
than just wipe my hands of it, because that's not being very responsible.
No, but now that you're back in New South Wales, you've still got a lot of the old client base from your days in Queensland. I know you're breaking in for Michael Friedman, and I know Anthony Friedman is sending horses up from Melbourne to you as well. So are you basically just got a client base from New South Wales, or are you still getting clients from other states sending you horses as well?
Not so much from Queensland, but I'm going to remind a few Queenslanders when I go up for the Magic Millions. But I
Yeah.
understand it's a long way for them to send a horse to be broken in. But no, Triple Crown Racing, Joe Pride, Proven Thoroughbreds, Matty Smith sends a few here. David Pfeiffer's sent a few here.
Yeah.
There's a few trainers I'm going to go and talk to when I go to the Magics again. Matt Kamani down south sends us a few. We get a few from around the local area, down on around from Kembla Grange trainers, a couple down there. But I reignited my association with Sam and Anthony at the Magic Millions last year and got everything they bought at the Magics.
Yeah.
And that was great. And then I was honoured that they approached me, and everything they bought in Melbourne this year and what they got down south, they wanted to send up to me from Melbourne. So, I must have been doing something right, because they chose to send them up here to me rather than getting them done down in Victoria. So,
Absolutely.
it's just been lovely working with, and now I'm working with Sam and William, with Richard, and it's just great to be able to associate with those younger guys that are taking over the reins and the responsibility.
Absolutely. You can't retire yet, mate. You've
No.
got too much support. Now we'd just like to go through your association, and this just happened to be that the trainers that we've sent a few of our horses to have sent the horses to you to break in. So you have broken in 4 of our yearlings this year, who are now 2-year-olds. So I'd just like to go through a few of these yearlings, Greg, with you, and just see any comments. So I don't know what your comments are going to be, so hopefully they're all positive. But the first one we'll talk about is the Star Turn Crystal Rock colt that we bought from the Inglis Classic. He was, from our point of view, one of the standout colts of the classic sale, and he is to be trained by Joe Pride, and Joe Pride was obviously using you as breaking of his horses. So I think you also had a bit of an association with Crystal Rock as well, I believe. So what did you think of this colt during his breaking in process?
Well, I was excited to get him, because when I saw the pedigree, my mind rushed back to his mother, because I trained her for a while for Sedgenho Stud.
Yeah.
And it was only a short training program, because the instructions were take her up the scone, see if you can win a race with her, and then we're going to breed her.
Yeah.
So I did that, had her for 2 starts. she ran second at a first, then she won a second start by about 5 lengths at Muswellbrook, and she was on the truck out to Sedge Ho and put in foal, and she's produced some really good horses. So she was a lovely mare. And when I saw this guy, and obviously I'd seen Big Parade and a few of the others that she'd thrown, so I was excited to get this horse. He's a really nice colt, and he's developed into a really nice animal. Very sensible and quiet, manageable. Did everything, ticked all the boxes as far as those early attributes, as I pointed out to you earlier. Was lovely balanced horse, went well, good mind, nice and strong. We This time around, he's been back in now a couple of weeks because he was broken in, let go. Then he went and had a session with Joe, and I think they liked him down there. Didn't do a lot with him, but came back for a spell. He's got a really lovely action. He's starting to realise he's a colt now. He's getting a springtime coming, and he's a 2-year-old, and so he's starting to work that out. But that decision will be left to you and Joe as to whether you leave him a colt or not. But he's a really nice animal, and I can't see why he wouldn't progress through. And I think Joe's had a history with the family as well, so he knows how to train that horse and what worked with the others. So you'll probably just put him through a similar program, but a nice horse.
I notice, so this is one of the horses that you've seen back through the system with the pre-training. Have you noticed, because I think he only came in the last week or so back to into pre-training. Have you noticed him grow and develop sort of physically over since you broke him in?
Absolutely. He's stretched out and lengthened up. He's probably grown half a hand. He's getting a wither. Like when we break a lot of these young horses in, they're all up in the hip and the rump and down in the wither, and you know they're big foals. So you've got to be careful how much pressure you put on them. But he's turning into a really nice horse, and he's certainly furnishing into a very imposing type of animal.
Yeah, and you mentioned Big Parade, who is his half brother, who was by Deep Field, who we tried actually to buy in the early days, but he was a bit out of our range at the time. I don't know if you saw Big Parade, but this horse, his physique, is it the physique of a sprinter? Is that what he gives you the impression?
Yes, he does. Look, his mother was very fast. She was a fast mare with a huge hip and a long stride. If anything, if you could fault the mare, she may have been a little bit weak through the shoulder and the neck. But Big Parade was fast, and he showed that, and he won a lot of his races by big margins. He's a deep field. I broke Deep Field's mother in many, many years ago, and she was a complete little hothead, very, very fast. David Hayes trained her, and he said to the owners at the time that it was the fastest 2-year-old he'd ever had through his stables.
Yeah.
She was just built for speed and run.
Yeah.
And but she was very fragile in the mind, and that can be passed on through some of the deep fields, not all of them. So Big Parade had a lot of speed and fast twitch muscle running through him, and that's what he was bred to do.
Yeah.
This bloke's a little bit more laid back, a little bit more conservative, but he's strong and he's got a great length of stride, and that's what I think. That's what's going to aid him later on. I won't predict him being a get up and run early 2-year-old. I think he'll be better as he progresses through his 2-year-old year, and certainly you may well see the best of him as a 3-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how I think Joe's taken that opinion as well. We haven't pushed him, definitely haven't pushed him pre-Christmas. He is still an acceptor in the Golden Slipper, as a lot of horses still are. Yep. But just to keep the options open, you just never know when a horse will stand up. But certainly think that as a 3-year-old, we would want him in the classic 3-year-old sprinting races.
Yep.
The next one is the Anders Lucky Legacy colt, which is being trained by Michael Friedman at Randwick. I know you broke him in, and you've also done some more work with him as well.
Yep.
What kind of impression has he done? Well, Anders is a first season sire, I should add as well. Have you
Yep.
seen many Anders? Have you got an opinion of the Anders? Types. Do they look like they'll run early? Because he was a very fast son of Not a Single Doubt.
Yeah, terrific. I've done probably half a dozen Anders over this 12 months. First thing I'll say is he tends to throw, the ones I've had have all been a bit different. So he's probably throwing to the mare a bit.
Yeah,
He's not really stamping them. Like some stallions, you just know that
yeah,
they're a So You Think, or they're a Lonro, or
yes,
they just stand out. You can pick them a mile away.
yeah,
And there's a few stallions that do that, not all of them. I can see a lot of Not a Single Doubt in this bloke. Obviously, Clearly Innocent was by Not a Single Doubt, so I'm partial to that pedigree.
yeah,
Had a lot of them over my lifetime. He's a horse that transformed. He was a nice colt, a bit light, had plenty of length about him when we broke him in.
yeah,
But when he went out for a spell and came back, and he just matured and strengthened, and he's grown into a really lovely horse. He's got a lovely length of rein, got a really good strong hip, which I think's important. His girth and front end is on the improve now that he's getting a wither and growing up in front. So he's got, I think he's going to have, by the look of him, a good lung capacity, and he's got amazing length of stride.
yeah,
I keep talking about length of stride, but the length of stride is the difference between winning and losing.
yes, yeah,
Usain Bolt's length of stride is half a metre longer than any other bloke he's ever run against.
yeah,
All the good horses, if you go through, if data is of any benefit, the best horses have a longer length of stride, and they're economical in their action. They don't look like they're going fast, but they are.
yeah. I
You
understand that. Yeah.
Winks is one that stands out like that. Like, she never looked like she was going quick, but she was just running at sensational times and rounding horses up and finding a way to win. But she just had an amazing length of stride.
Yeah, and as I said with these Anders, he was a very quick son of Not a Single Doubt. I think he was the fastest son of Not a Single
Yeah.
Doubt. Have you noticed just in general with the breed that they look like they'll be early runners, the Anders, or
I think
are they tending to be sort of 3-year-old types?
No, I think they'll get up and go pretty early
Yeah,
because they're strong. They've got good bone, and it depends on how quickly they're asked to go fast.
yeah,
But I think their temperaments are very good. I think and that'll help them, because when the pressure's put on, if they cope with the pressure mentally, then that all looks well for them to go to the races and perform. A lot of these early 2-year-old races are speed's a big advantage, but a lot of times it's the best educated horse, the most settled horse that goes out and wins, because he runs or she runs, doesn't do anything wrong during the race, and gets herself from A to B. And when their mind's in a good place, they run properly. But if they jump and do a lot of things wrong, then they're making it difficult to win.
yeah. Well, that mare, Lucky Legacy, is a daughter of Looking at Lucky,
Yeah,
and she's had 2 winners from 2 runners to date. So
yeah,
it's only a young mare. I think this Anders colt is probably the best she's produced so far, and she's now been moved down towards Sydney. Back to Michael Friedman now, hasn't she? Greg?
correct. Yeah,
Sorry, him.
yeah,
Sorry, I should
yeah.
say.
Yeah, so Michael's got him back down in town now, having a
Yeah.
look around, and I think I'm sure he'd be, he'll be sending you updates on him. But I've heard no adverse reaction from down that way
No,
in
we
regard to him.
haven't done a lot with him to date. Again, he's another horse that we haven't pushed as a 2-year-old just yet. We've still got him in the Golden Slipper, but again, that's just to see if they jump out of the ground in sort of February, then we may have a runner, but it's not particularly, we haven't particularly pushed him. I think he'll have a lot stronger prep with Michael this time around. The next one is And one of my favourites, along with the Star Turn, is the Russian Camelot Van Dancer. He's a
Yeah.
brown colt by another first season sire in Russian Camelot. And Van Dancer is a Savabeel mare who was stakes placed. So I know you only broke him in, and then he went back down to Melbourne to Anthony and Sam. And Anthony and Sam have got a really nice opinion of this horse. What did you think of him when he was breaking in, Greg?
I did like him from the get-go. He was a lovely type. Um, neither of your Melbourne horses that have gone to Sam and Anthony, they weren't physically as big as the first two
Yeah.
we've spoken about. They were a bit smaller, lighter framed, so a different type, which which is interesting. So, but again, sensible, handled everything really sweetly. He's uh, always very athletic, good on his feet. You know, quick to get out of the way, quick to go from stop to start. Um, just well balanced and good on his feet. And when we did ask him to lengthen stride up our back hill track with the pony or another older horse with him, he handled it really well. And I'm pleased that he's gone down there and shown the boys something. I didn't blow him too much. I didn't put too much of an opinion on him. I said, look, he's potentially a really nice horse, but I didn't say, oh, this is the one. I think you can get ahead of yourself sometimes, and I think that's a bit sort of me protecting myself a little bit. But he's a very nice horse, very athletic.
Well, it must be hard. Well, like this horse is, typically what we think is going to be a miler to
Yeah.
2,000 metre horse as a 3-year-old. As a breaker, is it real? Would they even stand out, those types in the breaking process? I mean, there's so much that they need to develop and grow, and
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that I spoke to you at length about,
yeah,
and to Sam and Anthony's racing manager at the time, that he was a young horse that was going to need time to develop and grow because he wasn't that big, but he even for a smallish horse. I'm going back to this length of stride. He had a beautiful action and just floated across the ground and carried himself very nicely. So that all augurs well for a mile or 2,000 metre horse, and there's plenty of good races for 3-year-olds, as we know.
yeah. And one of the comments you made about just how, yeah, when you sort of did gallop him down the back, one of the comments that Sam made to me when they sort of gave him a gallop at Flemington was that how professional he was and how he just knew what he was doing pretty much straight away. And he surprised him for a horse that you would think would take a long time to develop,
Yeah,
how well he was in understanding exactly what he needed to do. Now, as we said, again, another horse that we wouldn't push before Christmas and even after Christmas. He's not in a golden slipper. He's not in a blue diamond entries because he wouldn't be a horse that we would want to push to those kind of races. We would be looking at maybe, 1,400, 1,600 metre start as a 2-year-old. And then as a 3-year-old, hopefully he's a Caulfield Guineas type. And if he
yeah.
is, you can come down for that one, Greg. You might not keep the trophy for that one, but I might keep the trophy. But you can get in the photo with us.
Um, but look, just quickly before we move on to
Sure.
the last one, something I learnt years and years ago from some of my older compatriots and mentors that I've learnt from over the years, and young horses uh, can learn a lot from older horses. And when I say that, I mean by working a young horse, whether it be a yearling that's developing or a young 3-year-old that doesn't know much, if you work them side by side with an older gelding that's got a solid and a good length of stride, good action, you work up alongside them, they learn to almost mirror that and they try to go with that older horse
Yeah.
and in a relaxed manner. And so you can improve the way they travel by working them with another older horse. That's why we use these lead ponies a lot and not throwing two young horses in the deep end, trying to work them together
Yeah.
because they're all over the place. They're
Yeah.
bumping into each other, they're running away from each other. Then they don't learn from each other. But if
Yeah.
you work your younger horses and breakers, we do that with an older horse, they learn so much, and that helps with that professionalism.
Yeah. Excellent. And the last one is the Toronado Shine on Anna Colt. He's a half brother to See You in Heaven, who's multiple stakes winner that Richard and Chantal Jolly have got.
Yep.
She ran a placing just last Saturday at Caulfield. She's been such a consistent horse, and this is the younger half brother. He's actually a 15th of November foal. So when you got him, what did you think of him? He wasn't a horse that we thought was, going to be a 2-year-old. We thought he needed 6 months to sort of grow and develop.
Yep.
And what was your opinion of him when you through the breaking process? Because I know you haven't seen him since then either.
No. Well, the first thing we did when he arrived here was we put him in the paddock for 5 weeks,
Yeah,
and we left him alone because I think I made the comment he was just a big foal,
yeah,
very low in the wither, bit short in the neck, strong hip, a lovely little type, a bit of a nervy type, bit of a little hothead, and just wasn't. I think he'd come out of the sale and was still a bit mind boggled about the whole process. So he went straight to the paddock. We broke him in. He did stretch out a bit and grow, but he handled things well. We had to tippy toe around him for a while. He was a little bit of a feisty little bloke, so we didn't pressure, and we did a bit with him, and then we let him go, and then we did have him for a little second session before he went down there because, as I said, I wanted to make sure that all the boxes were ticked before he went. Again, an athlete, but he was a horse we had to just not pressure too much. Wait, just give him time to to focus on what we were doing. And I think I spoke to you about that, and certainly with the racing manager down, Brad, at the time, for the boys, just to not be in a hurry with him, because physically he probably would have handled it, but he wouldn't have mentally, and that was the thing that slowed us down. And but good on his feet, not a great length of stride, but he carried himself well. But he was strong, but his attitude was and confidence in himself was just a bit low. So he needed a bit of nurturing.
yeah. Well, he went through the English Easter sale, so obviously that's one of the leading sales in Australia on pedigrees,
Yep,
and he obviously had a strong pedigree, and that's why he went through that sale.
yep.
But I must admit, I thought we bought him for a bargain price because he
Oh
wasn't. He wasn't a yearling that was ready,
no,
and Lenny Russo, who does our bloodstock work, looked at him and said, "Ignore what you see today. In 6 months' time, this horse will be totally different." And that taking that time with that horse, he's now in work at Flemington with Anthony and Sam. He's actually having a jump out tomorrow morning, which I'm going to go down and see. Yeah, he has actually handled his preps really, really well now. They said he's very tough horse and growing, and so I think that. Taking our time with him in those early days, like you said, is sort of reap the benefits with this horse. And I think we'll have a really nice, exciting, again, I think a 3-year-old type,
yep,
even though he's handling his prep at the moment. We'll probably give him a break and not trial him this prep other than the short jump out tomorrow,
yep,
and then bring him back and really aim for the 3-year-old year with him because Toronados, again, are probably not seen as 2-year-olds, but are more 3-year-old types. And this mare herself has had 7 runners for 5 winners to date, Shine on Anna. So she's been a really good producer. And I think this horse will be a nice horse in time as well. So, yeah, that's been great for your insight today, Greg. Thank you very much for your time. Great to get to know you and your background. And as I said, I think you're the best breaker in Australia. So I'm always happy when our horses go down to your farms, wherever you are, for their early education. And hopefully we'll catch up with you soon at the sales and at the races. It's spring carnival time in Melbourne, great time of year. I know you don't get much chance to get down to Melbourne for these big carnivals, but yeah, hope to see you soon.
Well, I think if any of these babies step up and look like they're going to be running, I might have to get on a plane and come down because great to do it. You're right, I don't get to go to the races much anymore, but I'm happy out here on the farm flying under the radar a bit. That's good.